Welcome back to Cool Seminary Tutorials. Hi, I'm Professor Wendy. Today, I'm excited to introduce and define what is often called the social gospel. Lately, people have been interested in the social gospel partly because it's been referred to in U.S. political discussions. I happen to have researched the social gospel quite a bit and have even co-edited a book, for what that's worth, called Gender and the Social Gospel, published in 2003 by the University of Illinois Press. You can still get it new, and there are lots of used copies floating around. So, what is the social gospel? First, let's make a distinction between, on the one hand, a general concept of the social gospel, and, on the other, a specific historical phenomenon from around 100 years ago that has been widely recognized as the social gospel movement. They are closely related, and it's very easy to get them all mixed up. Both are important because they've impacted many, many lives, including probably yours and mine. First, the more general concept, which basically has to do with applying the gospel of Jesus Christ to social relationships, hence social gospel. The general concept of the social gospel comes directly from the teachings of Jesus Christ, especially Jesus' admonition to his followers to love your neighbor as yourself. Sounds easy enough, right? Sometimes. Jesus called this the second great commandment, second only to the first. The first, of course, is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Wow, more about the first commandment another time. As if to provide a vivid example of what he meant by the second commandment of loving one's neighbor, Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan teaches that even a complete stranger in a ditch by the side of the road and all those who are considered the least in the human social pecking order should be cared for with kindness and respect. The social gospel is also related to Jesus' parable about the Great Judgment Day, in which Jesus taught that each person will be judged according to how he or she has treated others. So the social gospel is a simple concept, not always so easy to put into practice. After all, who really wants to notice, let alone help, the needy, dirty, beat-up dude in the ditch at the side of the road? Unless, of course, it's Judgment Day, in which case you are probably glad you did. Christians throughout the ages have grappled with the meaning and ethics of these important but sometimes challenging relational teachings of Jesus. To give an example, in the 1700s, more than 100 years before the expression social gospel was popularized in the U.S., English Methodist priest and theologian John Wesley used the expression of social holiness to convey much the same idea. Holiness for Wesley was essentially a synonym for active love. He used the expression social holiness to describe the love of God in the heart, life, and social practice of a Christian. Because of this conviction about social holiness, Wesley was an avid proponent of the abolition of slavery, which he called the execrable sum of all villainies. He also advocated for the provision of education for all children, even the poor, among other social reforms. This emphasis was foundational in the identity and massive social impact of early Methodism as it spread throughout England, Ireland, North America, and way beyond. To summarize John Wesley's program of social holiness, then, it was an expression of what today we call the social gospel. That is, the application of the teachings of Jesus directly to social relationships in one's own historical context. Let's turn now to the social gospel movement in U.S. history. Most definitions of the social gospel movement in the U.S. place it between 1865, when the Civil War ended, and around 1920. Basically, the social gospel movement was a response by Christians during this period to the almost unimaginable social problems that erupted in the United States and elsewhere. These awful social problems were the result of the concurrence of unprecedented levels of industrialization, immigration, urbanization, and human migration, especially by those formerly held as slaves in the South. American cities, especially, were in dire crisis. The most deep-seated commitment of those who participated in the social gospel movement was to apply the social and relational teachings of Jesus, which we've defined as the social gospel, to these particular rampant social problems in the U.S. during this specific period of history. Examples of these social problems include urban overcrowding and lack of sanitation, extreme poverty, spread of contagious deadly diseases, horrific living conditions, interpersonal and institutionalized racial and ethnic prejudice, social violence including human trafficking and lynching, unemployment, illiteracy, worker exploitation, child labor, alcoholism, workplace hazards, and blatant, unchecked economic and political corruption, to name just a few. Most social gospel movement proponents were regular people, regular Christians who wanted to do what they could to make things better. Others were pastors and educators, and still others became social activists and even politicians. Some of the more famous included Washington Gladden, Ida B. Wells Barnett, Josiah Strong, Reverdy Ransom, Francis Willard, and Walter Rauschenbusch. More about some of these in later videos. There were many different stripes to the social gospel movement, and many disagreements then and now regarding how best to implement the social teachings of Jesus. Above all, the social gospel movement in the U.S. at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century was characterized by a belief that God had positioned Christians at this unique time in history in the face of these terrible conditions to usher in the kingdom of God on earth through the conversion of both personal lives and social institutions to the teachings of Jesus. This belief was bolstered by the then popular progressive view of history, not unrelated to social Darwinism, which was very popular at the time. The common view of history was that, in spite of how bad things were for many, by and large, life and society were progressing, that is, getting better and better. After all, look at all the inventions and opportunities that existed in this great and seemingly ever-expanding land of the mostly free. Proponents of the social gospel taught that Jesus had given the spiritual law of loving our neighbors as ourselves in order to address and prevent social problems. They earnestly believed the nation would stay on course, a course of greatness, only as citizens exercised their responsibilities and opportunities in a democratic society according to Jesus' teachings. So, was it successful? The social gospel movement succeeded in raising awareness within churches and society of the desperate nature of human social problems, and, for those who cared, they also drew attention to the social nature of sin and evil. The social gospel succeeded in helping to put forward some legislation to help address some of these social problems. As a result, in the U.S., you and I are protected by health, safety, employment, and housing laws that simply did not exist back then. Scholars have also traced a direct line between the social gospel movement, which was multiracial, and the subsequent civil rights movement that addressed critical issues of racial prejudice in the U.S. The social gospel movement succeeded in helping many people to understand our privileges and responsibilities as both followers of Jesus and as citizens of a democratic society in which anyone and everyone can make a difference. The social gospel movement lost its momentum with the First and Second World Wars, although it did not disappear, as citizens stepped forward to fight for the principles of democracy and freedom on an intensive global scale. However, the devastation of the world wars and of the Great Depression caused many to lose hope in the social gospel movement's belief in an imminent earthly kingdom of God. Nonetheless, the social gospel movement had made an impact on the U.S. as a nation and on many, many lives that benefited from the teachings of Jesus Christ, put into action by Jesus' followers through what historians call the social gospel movement. The social gospel movement, then, like Wesley's social holiness program, was another expression of what today we call, in more general terms, the social gospel. I'm Professor Wendy. Thanks for watching. Please leave feedback, ask questions, and click to subscribe to Cool Seminary Tutorials. Most of all, have fun learning.